And joining us in studio, Tony Modise, market commentator. Thank you so much, Tony, for coming through. The e-toll debacle has been with us even prior to the local government elections, where motorists were very adamant, saying that the consultation process was inadequate and they refused to accept it. Why has government, or the local government at least, kept this process still going?
We have no idea, Cindy, why they kept it going. Maybe, probably, they had some plans that were already in place that were not really much clear with, road users. Hence, there's always been fights since day one about these e-tolls. First of all, e-tolls is a concept that is from developed countries, developed economies. South African economy is not a developed economy. So you will ask yourself, tax money is normally money that is more used for infrastructure. Infrastructure involves roads, involves, schools, involves whatsoever infrastructure that needs to be developed. And if our tax money is not able to take care of us on the road, so what's the point? It's just being raised now, and here's another expense that is coming up. They paid 325 million for invoices. So it's quite challenging, because even this money is going out of the country. So our economy, hence, is forever under pressure because of these expenses that we get to come across.
Trying to fill a bucket riddled with holes with water, because as you're saying, invoices are being paid, or rather sent to non-paying or non-registered users who have no intention of taking or adopting this particular system. Why the over-reliance as well? Perhaps it's how the contract was structured, that it benefits two major international companies, a Swedish and an Austrian one.
Of course. And I believe now, if a contract does not, this e-toll is not profitable as they were hoping it will be profitable. And if the contract is costing us a lot of money and our economy is struggling, it needs to be scrapped. It needs to be taken down. There needs to be, when the contract was signed, there needs to be those provisions whereby if we are failing to receive any traction from this product that we are buying from you guys, or the services that we are acquiring from you guys, let there be a provision for us to at least scrap this contract. South African economy right now, it needs as much money as possible. We need to be attracting money instead of taking money out. And we need to be reducing pressure from consumers. Like yesterday alone, consumer confidence went down. Basically, consumers are not buying because of all of this. The tax are high, unemployment rate is high. There's a lot of things that are happening right now in South African economy. We cannot afford such expenses.
But is it lack of due diligence, or is it buying products or even solutions that do not fit our unique situation, because government is, they have to be seen to be delivering? What is your view? Is it just lack of due diligence, or just buying something that doesn't fit?
We could say that they had, like I said earlier, they might. We don't know what was the ultimate plan about putting down the e-tolls. Probably their plan was it had a good purpose in it, had a purpose that will increase jobs, that will make things easier for South African, of which it didn't happen like that. 90% of the time, or maybe 75% of the time, not everything that is new in any emerging markets that is working well in an already established market can always be profitable or can always work in our economy. So probably we could say that maybe they went through the whole process of making their own due diligence, making it a point that they understand what they're putting people into, and then here's it now. It's not working.
But I don't think they necessarily anticipated the backlash and the defiance campaign that came from the likes of OUTA and other organizations, including motorists, just on principle in how this thing was implemented, and for the mere fact that it benefits these major multinationals. So where does that leave us? Because it sounds like we're paying penalties based on the contractual terms to these companies, then really benefiting this country.
We need to be in a position of scrapping it, Cindy, before it gets even any worse. We need to scrap the contract and take down the e-tolls, and it completely needs to be out.
But there's been cross-subsidizing or cross-financing of this project, not only from the roads department, it would be the transport department, and including economic development, etc. So even the 8 billion rand that we're talking about could even be more colossal. We don't know how much SANRAL is in debt and how this money is going to be recovered.
Of course, they need to make a provision for it. They need to make a provision for it. The idea is they need to find ways into recovering those debts that they already have now instead of acquiring more debt. Because obviously, with how our economy is looking, with the state of our economy, there's going to be more debt in this situation.
Tony, we're also joined by Mr. Howard Dembowski. He's the chairman of the Justice Project South Africa, excuse me. Good evening to you and welcome. Maybe you can give us a little bit of history as to how the SANRAL project, or e-tolling specifically, is still continuing. It's precipitated now to where it is. There had been parallel processes of trying to intervene by incentivizing motorists, reducing the rates, etc. But seemingly the debt is just escalating.
Yes, absolutely. And it's an unfortunate thing with any project like this, where if you do not have 100% buy-in, you're in trouble. And the fact is that SANRAL is nowhere near 100% buy-in. In fact, they're nowhere near 50% buy-in. So it's an impossible situation. And why it is that they continue on this path of believing that they're going to be able to somehow convince everybody that this is a great idea is beyond any logic whatsoever.
There was a process as well where experts were brought in to look at the feasibility of it and how, as you're saying, with a newer strategy to convince and persuade motorists to buy into it. What results did that yield, if you were part of that, Mr. Dembowski?
Well, I assume that you're talking about Premier David Makura's e-toll reviews panel.
There have been a couple of them. I think there's one about 3 years ago as well.
Yeah, that was the one that we participated in. And it was unbelievable how the result came out as endorsing e-tolling, coming up with this new dispensation, as it was so called, which hasn't been fully implemented yet, but would never succeed in any event because of the fact that people have not bought into this concept. It's time to really pull the plug on this thing. This country is hemorrhaging money hand over fist to foreign nations, I might add. And, you know, you just look at this and you say, where is this all going to end? Is it going to end in SANRAL having to be bailed out by government, just like SAA has just been bailed out again? Or is it going to be that they finally decide, let's pull the plug on this thing, let's actually now listen to what we were told in the beginning, which was very plain and simple. You can fund these roads by implementing a minimal cost fuel levy.
Yeah, maybe also the deeper rooted problem is the subgenres or subdivisions that are created within government departments in themselves, because this being an agency of the South African Transport Department, similarly to what you could argue with the social development having SASA and that particular entity having its own mandate, leaves too many loopholes and situations like we have now. Tony, what's your view?
It's quite challenging, Cindy. Yeah, like he said now, it needs to be taken down before they acquire a lot more debt, whereby they'll need the government to rescue them. So the quicker they take them down, the better.
Yeah. Do you think that maybe SANRAL should be reintegrated and not have the autonomy it does into the transport department? Would that help?
Well, most certainly. The fact is that the state-owned enterprises, and let's just understand that word enterprise, SANRAL is in fact one of the few legalized Ponzi schemes in the world. It's a Ponzi scheme, nothing else. It sells bonds to repay people who bought bonds from it in the first place. That is the true definition of a Ponzi scheme. Now, SANRAL, in my view, and I know that it sounds like we're always knocking poor old SANRAL, because they actually do quite a good job on a lot of the roads that they maintain in South Africa. In fact, let's say the vast majority of the roads. It's strange that it's called the South African National Roads Agency, and yet it is responsible for such a small proportion of the roads in South Africa. It's unbelievable. I think it's time that the Department of Transport and central government were to look at this and say, this is a national roads agency. Let's do away with all of the provincial roads agencies, with all of the local roads agencies. Let's have one which is responsible for doing the job and doing it well and fund it properly, instead of adding a fuel levy to our fuel cost at the pump, and then taking that money and, I might add, not spending it on roads.
But there has to be accountability, though. Now that we understand that there may be certain rules flouted or oversight or lack thereof, buying a product that doesn't fit the South African market and now has to be reversed, which is going to cost even more money because there are contractual obligations we have with these national foreign companies.
Yeah, of course, there are some contractual obligations that are there, but I believe that there should be a way in terms of working around those. Instead of you rather cut the cost moving forward instead of keep acquiring the cost, eventually whereby they will end up having the government to bail them out, of which it might be a problem. Those contractual costs, they need to find a way to work around them so that you have these e-tolls out.
Do we even know how much debt Sandoval is in, considering that they're still using these companies to invoice non-registered users, insisting on sending it via post, which has now come up to a couple of 100 million rand in those functions? Why are they still operational? Shouldn't there be an interdict or something?
Well, the fact is that they're compelled by law to issue and print and post invoices. So, you know, it's very, very simple. It was all part of the grand scheme of things to try and intimidate people into buying into this thing. And I would say that the central government needs to actually take responsibility here and say, you know what, guys, we underestimated the South African population. We thought that we could just forge ahead and do what we liked without consulting people properly. And with coming up with this huge money-making scheme, instead of just doing things in a reasonable fashion, and you know, nobody would have complained. Trust me, they would have maybe toyed for about 10 minutes if the fuel price went up by 6 cents a litre. But when last have you seen anybody toying about the fuel price going up because the fuel levy's gone up? I'll tell you when last. Yeah. Never.
All right,
absolutely
just hold
never.
that thought, Howard. We've got a caller, France. In Pretoria, good evening to you and thanks for your patience. What's your comment or question?
Hello, I'm just very frustrated with what is happening with our government. You know, each and everything they put on program doesn't work for us.
Yeah.
It only works for them. When are going to work for us, the poor people? We are working, we are staying in the places where there are roads and infrastructure, where people cannot get the things the way they are looking for. But they are only looking for money to keep for themselves to go up.
Yeah,
so we are really frustrated.
I agree with you. It seems that government invests more than what they are yielding from that investment. And especially when it comes to bulk infrastructure projects, we don't see the report in terms of the skills transfer from these Swedish and Austrian companies. What is the equity or even the black representation in terms of their ownership?
We do know about that.
All right, tell us more.
We know that electronic toll collection set up a bogus fronting black empowerment company in order to win this contract. We know that. We know that black empowerment fell away once they got it. But they still retain it. And, you know, you've got to ask yourself serious questions about how did that happen in the first place and how has it been allowed to continue? And then this is the interesting part of this whole thing. I would like to ask my fellow South African citizens this very serious question. Do we really believe that South Africans are so technically challenged that we cannot make a thing called an e-tag? Because I'll tell you right now, we've made far more technologically advanced devices in this country. So please don't ask me to buy into the fact that some Austrian in Hitler's birthplace has come up with a unique idea. What a load of nonsense.
The public consultation in itself is often almost hidden, if you like, in how it's advertised. You know, Sandoval has argued to a great extent, saying they had advertised in newspapers, etc. People were aware of it and they'd gradually implemented this process. And it's become such an embarrassment, I think, for the Department of Transport, Sandoval specifically, that they cannot afford to retain this particular project. But it's not just going to die a natural death. Something needs to happen, and I'm not sure what exactly, Tony.
But the question is, why are they still keeping it? They see that it's about to die, and it's slowly dying. Why are they still keeping it? Do they want it to fall into a level whereby it's uncontrollable anymore? The idea is to control it now while it's still controllable, while it's still in hand, because it's coming to a level whereby it won't be controllable at all.
Yeah, we've only recently heard of the concept of open tenders, so maybe going forward they won't have these clandestine meetings and signing contracts that are fleecing money from South Africa. But civic organizations, yourselves, Justice Project SA, is there anything that's on the cards at the moment to compel Sandoval to scrap this contract? And before you respond, let's take Lindy in Pretoria. Good evening, Lindy. How are you? Hi, Lindy.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Wandi, not Lind, Wandi.
Aski sor. Shapa kunjani?
Yeah. Sharp, mfethu.
All right, what's your comment or question?
Mfethu, kuyafiwa la. Le ithole lena bayisuke la.
Manje uzosuka kanjani ndoda kunama contract? What is your proposition?
No, bayisuke. Sinama. Hello?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Oh, you caught me. Yeah, sure.
All right, thanks so much, Wandi in Pretoria, saying e-toll must go. The motorists are struggling as it is, and I assume he's one of those that bought the tag. There was a process as well to prosecute non-paying citizens, that the ARTO, or the demerit system, they could even revoke your license. How far are we? Is there a need for concern, or does Sandoval have bigger problems than arresting non-compliant motorists?
Well, let's actually pull that back a few steps. Unfortunately, we need to, because it was the assertion of Vusi Mona and Nazir Ali that they were actually going to give people criminal records and thereby force them into a situation where they wouldn't get credit. What they didn't understand is that those people wouldn't get jobs if they had criminal records, but that's beside the point. We pointed out at that stage, which was way back in 2013, that you can't do that. You need to operate in terms of the ARTO Act. And the fine for contravening a road traffic sign saying that this is a toll road is 250 Rand. There are no demerit points associated with it. So, sorry, Sandoval, but you're not going to be able to revoke people's driving licenses because they refuse to give in to your extortion. However, in December 2015, the National Department of Transport published amendments to the ARTO regulations which would allow them to include 100 infringements on a single infringement notice, which is completely contrary to the Act. We pointed it out to them, and since then, nothing has happened. You know what? Quite frankly, I can tell you right now that the feeling out there amongst the general motorists is bring it on. Because you know what? You want to withhold our license sticks? That's fine. We'll withhold our license fees. So if you want to trigger another wave of civil disobedience, you're going the right way about it. And quite frankly, it is going to end up being a fundamental disaster, because after that, people will just say, you know what? I'm not going to pay license fees for anything, including TV, including my motor vehicle. I'm not going to renew my driving license. Do what you may.
All right, let's get a perspective from Sipho. Good evening to you, and thanks for calling. How are you?
I'm good, my lady. How are you?
I'm very well, sir. What's your comment or question?
I just wanted to say, when I hear that most higher percentage of this money that is made out of the e-toll are going to the foreign countries, that is disgusting. Because when we were opposing this thing, you know, we were worried that the government is going to rip us off our money. We didn't know that, after all, it's not even going into the coffers of our government. It's being taken by foreign people, foreign nationals.
Yep, Sipho, unfortunately, that is our reality. That's what we're trying to discern here. Is there anything that can be done in the immediate, be it legal action, and what are the implications if you now have to recover the monies from these foreign companies? Should they be found to have acted unlawfully, or that the contract was awarded irregularly?
They need to look at those contracts. They need to be properly audited. So whatever that is being paid out, and it was paid out irregularly, it needs to be paid back. So they need to make it a point that they are dealing with regulated companies. That's before they can even start having any negotiations with them in terms of having these contracts in place.
Yeah. Should government fail to act, is that the only other way we can go, litigation process?
Well, litigation's been tried. Let's be very honest about it. And it's failed to bring government to its senses. Civil disobedience, I would actually say, has been the greatest contributor to the failure of this thing. And the fact is that until such time as government decides to apply a tourniquet to this hemorrhage, we are going to continue to hemorrhage money. And I don't see any prospect of raking back monies from the likes of CUPS Trafficcom. I don't see any prospect. But what I do see a prospect of is ending this bleeding. And that, I think, has got to be an important consideration. And actually starting to put some money into the actual tarmac instead of enriching foreign companies which were struggling on their own stock exchanges until all of a sudden they got South Africa. Then their share prices went berserk. Isn't it quite amazing that it decides, or a foreign company, which is on the verge of collapsing, okay, suddenly gets revived by this third world country? I find this absolutely amazing.
We're going to have to leave it there indeed, Howard. Thanks for your time, and you at home for calling in as well. We're speaking to Howard Dembowski, chairman of the Justice Project South Africa, Tony Modise, market commentator, and you at home. We appreciate your calls. We'll take a quick ad break and see you shortly.